Hey guys, I beat the DLC and I want to hop on the Shadow of the Erdtree boss ranking videos too, so let's go. For the sake of this video, I'm going to be doing every Remembrance boss plus, the one other one. I'm going to be doing the ranking on like my personal preference, so I'll do a balance of difficulty with how cool the boss was, how fun it was, because I know there's like a million billion rankings on how difficult the bosses are, but I want to get into the actual like meat and bones of the boss. Just because a boss is hard doesn't mean it's like the #1 boss in the whole DLC. Anyways, enough yapping. I don't really even have a lot to say about this boss. Chances are you'll probably forget you even fought him. The Erdtree avatar has 3 total stages, each having more health and newer attacks compared to the last. You can hit his stem and any other part of his body, but it won't really do a lot of damage, and you'll do the majority of his damage to his head. I think the best way to defeat this boss is to learn his attacks, even maybe 2 or 3 times, and then wait for him to like do the attack where he shoves his head into the ground and punish that, or just try your best to punish most of his attacks where his head will be low. Other than that, his attacks are pretty much standard. He doesn't really have a lot of attacks that he does in a succession. It's pretty easy to manage. The Sunflower from Plants vs. Zombies is probably stronger than this guy.
I am Melania.
Coming in at the number 10 spot here, we have Erdtree Melania, aka Romina, Saint of the Bud. She's just basically a worse version of Melania's second form, with 2 extra centipedes. This boss is actually one of the 2 required bosses in order to get to Radahn. But unlike Dancing Lion, Rolana, Mesmer, etc., you actually don't need to defeat her to progress all the way to the Erdtree avatar. In other words, you can get to her area pretty early in the game, and you can choose to come back to her later on when you're ready to fight Radahn. She does do this butterfly scarlet rod attack, but it's pretty easy to dodge, as goes for most of her attacks. Her centipedes just make it a little difficult to tell what attack she's about to do, because she likes to dance around and like fidget with her centipedes before she attacks. But yeah, other than that, I'm just dragging this ranking, so let's move on. And coming in the number 9th place on my tier list, we have Erdtree, Lord of Frenzied Flame. When you walk into his arena, you are greeted by this little homeless guy that you just like beat the hell out of. But then he pulls this ginormous sword thing out of his head and the actual boss fight begins. Now, Erdtree attacks in a quick succession, but luckily for you, most of his attacks do very low damage, especially at a high Erdtree fragment level. He has a couple of attacks. Probably the one you'll get hit by the most is this Beyblade one where he spins around. It's pretty confusing to tell when the hit is actually gonna land, and if you're willing to put the time into like no hitting him, I guess go for it. My point here is that he's pretty easy. As long as you don't get Madness buildup, you should be fine. The main thing you should focus on dodging is his Madness attacks. His physical attacks do damage to you, but imagine it like he's using a Naga Kiba or something. Just don't let him proc bleed on you and you'll be fine. I would have liked to put this boss higher, but I feel like I put him so low because you kind of have to go out of your way to find him. You'll see as we get closer to the more difficult and higher bosses up on this list, you'll see a lot of them are actually required to be defeated in order to move on to the next part of the DLC. As for these bosses, a lot of them are just gimmick bosses that you kind of have to just watch a YouTube video on how to get to. Although the Abyssal Woods where Erdtree resides is actually pretty cool, and I definitely recommend exploring because there's a special little someone you might want to meet there. In the number 8 spot, we have Commander Gaius. This is probably the first boss fight of this video that's actually quite difficult. I would say by far the hardest attack to dodge is his charge. I don't know, there's something about it. You just have to be frame perfect with your rolls. I used Bloodhound Step for a while, and if you're struggling on this boss fight, I definitely recommend using that Ash of War because it makes it a lot easier to dodge the charge attack. However, ultimately I ended up using Malachite's Black Blade, and it worked pretty good as well. Unfortunately, Commander Gaius is also not really a required boss you have to defeat, and he resides right behind Mesmer's specimen storage plate. He also does this silly attack where he like goes in the air and launches himself at you, kind of like Radahn did. He reminds me of Tree Sentinel, but like worse. I struggled more with the Draconic Tree Sentinel than I did with this guy. Final thoughts is he's pretty fun. It's a little difficult to get to know his attacks, but I recommend using a heavy hitter. Maybe you could use Guts Greatsword or something like that. Doesn't have to be the Black Blade, but Just pick a high damage weapon, because when he finishes attacking, there's a very long period that you have to punish him. So get those heavy attacks in. Oh my god, where do I even start with the Putrescent Knight, man? This boss is just something else. He'll have you sitting there wondering like, hey, is it my turn to attack? You know, I got a weapon too. I would like to get some hits in. Also, every single time you start the boss fight, you have to jump off of this cliff. A little annoying, but the first few times you fight this boss, you're just gonna be like buffing and jumping down into a cliff just to like die instantly, and it's kind of annoying. But trust me, you're gonna want to play this one out. Don't use any summons. This playthrough of the DLC, I did no summons, but I understand if you want to use summons. You know, some of these bosses are quite difficult and took me some time to do, but please play Putrescent Knight all the way through. No summons, no magic, just thug it out, man. This boss fight is so much fun, and it is so nice to finally beat him. He has this one attack in his first phase where he will hit the ground, swipe at you 3 more times, and then his horse will come, and then he'll swipe again, and then his horse again, and then he'll swipe and then smack into the ground. He just won't stop attacking. But once you get good at dodging it, honestly, this boss fight gets really, really fun. Not to mention his second phase honestly isn't that bad. You just have to learn how to jump over the fire attacks that he does, or frostbite fire, I don't know. Ultimately, it's a pretty fun boss fight, and I definitely 1,000,000,000% recommend that you see it through to the end. Also, you can get the Putrescent's Cleaver from his Remembrance, which is a really good weapon that I almost beat Radon with. It ultimately was not the weapon that I did kill him with, but I used it for a while, and it's got pretty good damage as well as frostbite buildup.
Days in the life of Fingies.
Hold on. Before you start roasting me for putting Metter over Gaius and Putrescent Knight, let me explain. Metter is probably known to be one of the easier bosses of this DLC, mainly because of how weak her, or his, I honestly don't even know the gender of this thing, first form. Whatever it is, the first form is supposed to be really easy, which honestly it is. But second form, it honestly gets pretty difficult, especially if you're a sword user or just a melee user in general. A really underrated attack of Metter's is where they summon these finger thingies, and it's honestly pretty difficult to deal with them because Metter does not stop attacking and will literally get free hits on you as you try to kill the little minions. But hold on, the minions and the lasers are not the main reason why I put Metter so high up. You get Metter's like club thingy, and honestly, this is probably one of the most powerful weapons in the game. And it is so unbelievably underrated as well. The Ash of War for this thing, you bash the ground and then some purple lasers come up after. With proper scaling and everything, this does about like 4,000 damage. I also used this thing against Radon for a little bit, and I probably was more efficient with it than I was with the Putrescent Cleaver. Another reason why I want to put Metter so high up is because the quest in order to get to Metter actually doesn't feel completely weird, out of pocket, and random. You can honestly do the quest without looking at a YouTube video using the ruins maps given to you in Metter's mansion, and honestly it's just a pretty interactive, fun, and not too difficult or annoying boss fight. Now, coming in at the number 5 spot, we have Divine Beast Dancing Lion. Let me start off by saying I am so biased towards this boss, and I would love to have put him higher. This was my first boss back on Elden Ring after a very, very long break. I took a very long time to beat him because it was my first time back on a Souls-like after a while, and it was just brutal, man. It was a bloodbath. I think I got so good at fighting this boss, I could probably do a no-hit if I really wanted to. His first phase, he just kind of does some weirdly timed attacks that you kind of just have to learn one by one. But once you get to second phase, he just starts shifting through the elements. Like, he becomes Placidusax, and then he just starts throwing tornadoes, and he just goes through like the whole list of elements. And the attacks are honestly pretty fun to dodge. It's fun to play against him. It's fun to deal damage. It doesn't feel unfair. You have plenty of times to punish him because he likes to take his time after attacking. Although he does probably have more health than a lot of the other bosses, you know, it kind of balances out with having a lot of punishing time. He's the very first boss you fight in the DLC, and you fight him pretty quickly. If you're struggling, definitely level up your Shadow Tree level. When I fought him, I didn't really think Shadow Tree mattered, and I fought him on like Shadow Tree 2. So yeah, definitely level up the Shadow Tree and have some fun with this guy. You know, if you're struggling, take a break. I would definitely say it is very relieving, and it is very relieving to finally beat him. It's rewarding. I still have no idea what his remembrance does. I don't even... I'm gonna keep this remembrance forever. Now, believe it or not, Bale is actually not a remembrance boss fight, so instead you'll just get his heart, which you can then exchange for one of two I mean, you know what, now I think about it, I guess it is remembrance. It's not officially remembrance because it basically remembrance, but it's not officially remembrance. However, this does not mean Bale is going to be easy or fall short of what a Shadow of the Erdtree boss has. In fact, I'd say this is probably the second or maybe third hardest boss in the entire DLC. I don't know if hard is the best word to use to describe him, because once you learn his attacks, it's basically just a game of patience. He has a motherload of health, and you will have an opening to punish him, I'd say on average maybe once every minute. So you gotta make sure those Royal Knight's resolve hits. It took me 11 minutes to beat him start to finish on the attempt that I obviously beat him on. Not total, but the one fight alone, it took 11 minutes to beat him. Pretty long boss fight. I also really like Egon and how he yells all the time. It's funny. It's definitely going to go down as iconic. They hammered the nail on this section of the DLC. I really like everything about Bale. First phase, you kind of just thug through and you're like, alright, that's not so bad. And then he just starts like spewing fire everywhere and get a bunch of undodgeable attacks, or really hard to dodge attacks, and it just gets harder and harder to actually land those hits. Eventually, I just started getting to like 15% boss health with 8 flasks, and then I would just brute force. I would trade with him. I would get a hit off and let him hit me so that way I could actually deal damage. Because in the very last phase of the boss fight, I'd say when he has around 20% health left, it is so hard to hit him. In the number 3 spot, we have R'Lana. A lot of people complained about how hard R'Lana is, and yeah, no, she's pretty damn hard. I would honestly say first phase is more difficult than second phase, because in second phase, you can kind of spam dodge, and you'll end up dodging, I'd say, 80% of her attacks. However, in first phase, she does like 12 part attacks that each have like different amounts of timing in between them, so you can't just spam dodge because you will get hit. She just does not stop attacking. If you thought Putrescent Knight attacked a lot, you're in for a treat with R'Lana. Her second phase, she gains elemental power. Her swords get magic and fire. Like I said, you just spam roll, you should be good. However, when she does the moon attack, you have to make sure you time your jumps right, otherwise you will get one hit. The first hit lands, then all of the following hits will also land, and it will guarantee that you die. In the number 2 spot, I would put Mesmer here. Mesmer is honestly my favorite boss from the DLC. He is honestly pretty difficult. It'll take you a while to learn his attacks because similar to R'Lana, he has multiple part attacks that are each timed differently, so you have to make sure you have your dodge times perfect. However, unlike R'Lana, once second phase comes, he just changes completely. Instead of swinging at you with a sword, most of the time he'll just be sicking his serpents on you, and if you're lucky enough to use the lock-on feature, your camera will just go absolutely everywhere. He just goes flying from one side of the arena to the other, and then his serpents just start going crazy. I will say it's not as bad as R'Lana though, because learning his serpent attack timing is a lot more intuitive. They tend to lean back right before they go in for the attack, so you kind of pick up when to dodge pretty easily. Help me! However, if you do get hit by one of his attacks, they are pretty high damage dealers, and he has a good amount of health. So if you want to beat this boss, you're going to have to get pretty good at dodging. This is not only not a remembrance boss fight, but it's not even really a boss fight at all. You fight against Lita, who is a knight that you can summon to fight R'Lana, but later on in the story, she ultimately switches up on you and summons a bunch of her friends, such as Dryleaf Dane, to try to kill you. Depending on how far you get with quest lines, there'll be more people that actually just get summoned. But when I did it, I only had to fight 3. A lot of people said that this was completely impossible to do without summons, but I actually found a way. You know what I did? I went full bleed and poise. Yep. That's right. All I did was just kill each person that got summoned before the next one got summoned so I could take them on one by one. It was really hard though, because I had to deal like 15k damage in 10 seconds. But thanks to Bloodflame Blade, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, and a lot of other bleed buffs.
Both Perhaps your deeds will ever be praised in song.
I'm assuming you probably guessed it, but number 1 on my tier list is Radahn. I don't even know where to start talking about Radahn here, so let me just go. In the first phase, he just ends up swinging his Star Scourge great swords randomly. When you first start the boss fight and play against him in first phase, you'll be like, okay, I see why this is hard. Eventually, you'll start picking up on it and doing more and more damage, and you're like, okay, wait. Maybe this isn't so bad. And then the second stage comes where the very first attack that he does will nuke the entire screen. You can't drink a flask. You have no time to drink a flask. Switch weapons, do whatever. You literally, as soon as you see that attack, have to start beelining it outside of it. If you get hit by it, it'll do half health. Probably more if you don't have over-leveled Vigor or Golden Vow. Also, like, I don't even know how to describe some of his attacks. I just had to pick up on it by trial and error. He has this one where he runs off in the distance and then like spam attacks you like 8 times in a row, but only one of them is an actual attack. So you have to learn when to dodge at the real attack. He also can shoot this big golden disc at you. He can pick you up and one-shot you if you get picked up twice in a row. And once he hits about 20% health, he will teleport into the air and then come flying down into the map. And if you're anywhere that isn't the farthest corner of the map, you will absolutely get obliterated by this. Words can't even describe how difficult this boss fight was for me to do, and I don't understand how people like Let Me Solo Them exists. This is mind-blowing that people managed to do this at level 1. I was struggling with my backhand blades with Bloodhound Step, Bloodflame Blade, Golden Vow, Rune Arc. I don't even know. But it was a great feeling when I finally managed to beat him. I also did it in his own armor, and it was a great feeling to finally be done with this DLC. Now I'm gonna go play Sekiro.